What's up everybody, Jared here with carbuzz.com, and today I am bringing you a first drive review of the 2024 Alfa Romeo Tonale. This is a very exciting product because this is the first Alfa Romeo that the brand has launched in 6 years. That is the last time they launched a new product, that being the Stelvio, which is an SUV that's a little bit larger than the Tonale, so this is a very important product. You might be wondering, what is the Tonale? Where does it stack up in the Alfa Romeo lineup? And where does it stack up against other luxury compact utility vehicles? So you can think of this as a subcompact luxury SUV, similar to something like a BMW X1, a Volvo XC40, a Mercedes-Benz GLA. So that is what you have to consider it against. However, this is a plug-in hybrid, which none of the cars that I just mentioned offer, at least in the United States, making the Tonale quite unique. Now, I think the big reason why you're going to buy this car, or indeed any Alfa Romeo, is going to be the Italian styling. The front end of this car is gorgeous. It looks just like the concept car that they revealed a couple years ago back at the Geneva Auto Show. I love the 3 headlight design here. You've got like the 3 pods here that harkens back to old school Alfa Romeos like the SZ. We have their infamous shield grille here at the front with the triangle. You can get this with a silver finish on certain trims, but we have the top Veloce model, so it's going to be blacked out. Of course, we have Alfa Romeo's amazing logo with the snake eating a baby. I think it is one of the coolest logos in the business. And you've probably noticed this color. It's called Verde Metallic Fangio, I think. It's named after Fangio, the 5-time Formula One world champion who used to race for Alfa Romeos back in the 1950s. So that's Alfa playing into its Formula One heritage. They do have an F1 team now as well. This color is going to set you back $2,200 though, so it is quite expensive. They do have a really nice red and a really nice blue that are around $500 or $600 that are a little bit cheaper if you don't want to spend all of the money on this gorgeous green. As I mentioned, we have the Veloce trim, which is going to be the top trim level of the Tonale. You're going to get 19-inch wheels as standard on the Veloce. These are optional 20-inch wheels though. They're about $2,000 extra. So again, a nice chunk of change to get these wheels, but they are gorgeous. I love the 5 circle pattern here. We also have an optional package here that's going to get us red brake calipers. Those are Brembo 4-piston brake calipers. We've got 2-piston calipers there in the back. 18 is going to be your base wheel on the Tonale. You can upgrade to 19s for about $1,500. But as I mentioned, they're standard on the Veloce. We've got this black surround here, which I kind of like, splits it up, gives it that higher SUV character, but without being cheap, unpainted body cladding. I like how we have the little Italian flag here on the side of the mirror. That's a nice little touch, as is the electrified version of the little Alfa Romeo snake here. This actually lights up at night and gives you your state of charge. I mentioned that this is a plug-in hybrid. There is going to be your charge door for charging at night. You can also put gasoline in on the other side. And here at the back, this is just, again, a really pretty car. I like this sort of one-piece taillight design. We do have a sport exhaust on this car with these twin pipe outlets that I think looks really nice. And we've got Tonale spelled out in a nice cursive Italian font. Overall, I love the exterior of this car. I think it's going to turn a lot of heads. Now, in terms of cargo space, the Tonale is a subcompact crossover, but Alfa Romeo has given it plenty of room. We've got just under 23 cubic feet of cargo space back here. It's actually pretty comparable to the Stelvio, even though the Stelvio is a larger vehicle overall. We do have a little bit of storage under here. You can fit your charging cable in there. We do also have some little hooks here on the side. You can fold down the seats, but you're going to have to open up the rear seats to do so. There you go. You can see what the seat looks like folded. We've got just under 51 cubic feet with those seats folded. It is a good size, but I wouldn't call it massive. And the cargo space doesn't really impress me too much, but the rear seat is pretty nice. This is me sitting behind my own driving position, so I can sit back here quite comfortably. We have air vents, as you'd expect from a luxury vehicle like this, as well as our USB and USB-C port. I do think that this Back seat feels a little bit bigger than some other subcompacts that I've sat in, like the Audi Q3 and BMW X1. So this is a really nice place for all of your passengers and their cargo. All right, so now let's check out the interior of the Alfa Romeo Tonale. As I mentioned before, we are driving the top Veloce trim. You're actually going to get a Alcantara as standard on the Veloce. It's black and then it has like a red pattern behind it with like a red stitching. You can opt for these seats that are the full leather. We have the Alfa Romeo logo here on the headrest, but no contrast stitching in like a bright color. I kind of wished it had like red or green stitching or something to kind of offset the interior. It does look a little bit plain in here. The Dodge Hornet also has similar seats than this that you can get in bright red leather. Kind of wish Alfa Romeo would have done a brown or a red or something like that. These seats are heated and they are ventilated optionally. That is part of an additional package, even on the top Veloce trim. The lower trim versions of the Tonale are going to have something Alfa Romeo calls sport cloth. I actually sat in it. It does feel really nice, and you can get leather on those lower trims as well. And now let's properly step inside the Tonale and shut the door. We've got our start button here on the steering wheel, which is very cool, very Formula One-like, almost like a Ferrari, which is kind of a nice touch. And you're going to see that the dashboard here is going to remind you quite a bit of the Dodge Hornet because it shares pretty much everything in common with that car architecturally. I think some of these materials, like I don't remember this trim piece on the Dodge Hornet, so there are some things that are a little bit different from this car to that car, but the technology here is really good. Let's start with the 12.3-inch digital cluster here, because I think this is a really cool touch. This is going to be standard on all Tonales, which is a nice thing to have. And as you can see, this is sort of our modern gauge graphic. We have our tachometer on the side ranging from 0 to 7. It's on 0 right now because we're just running on electric power alone. You have your speedometer there on the left, and you have a ton of good information here. You have how much fuel you have in miles, but then you also have how much range you have in electricity over there on the right, which is like really nice. And then using this button, so I click this button once and now I can adjust what's in the center screen. So as you can see, I can have sort of half of it be a map, I can have it be my fuel economy, I can have it be messages, I can have it be like a charge power gauge, or I can just have it be a speedometer. If I click that twice, now I can adjust what's in between my gauge cluster here. I can also just have it be a gauge cluster, so I don't have to have any information there if I don't want. See, now I just have kind of my digital needle there. And there is, again, just such good information that you can have here. For example, if I pull up the trip, let me just go ahead and find the trip. There we go. You're going to see how many miles you've done on gasoline, or how many miles you've done total on gasoline, how many miles you've just done on electricity. That's nice if you're one of those people that loves to be nerdy and calculate that sort of thing. I probably would take full advantage of that. We also have our DNA selector. So this is going to be your drive modes. I'll talk a little bit more about what each one of those means when we get it out on the road. But when you fiddle around with those, you are going to see that these gauges change. Now, instead of a tachometer in A mode, you're going to have a power charge gauge, similar to what you would get on a Toyota model. If I go into the D mode, now you're going to see I have a much more prominent tachometer. So the gauges do change a lot just depending on the drive modes. And you can switch what the gauges look like using a little button on the end of the stalk here. So let me go ahead and put it in efficiency. And now let's see what else we've got. So this is your more simple mode. It's just going to kind of clear out all but the most important information if you just want nice and simple gauges. This is probably my absolute favorite one. These look like classic Alfa Romeo gauges. I think that looks so cool with like the old school Alfa Romeo needle. And then just like with the other gauges, as you can see, they do change depending on what drive mode you're in. These look fantastic. I absolutely love how those look. You can also have it be a full map if you want. So let me load up the full map. There we go. And now I can have my full driving directions in this gauge cluster if that is the information I want up there. So top points for Alfa Romeo on this gauge cluster. It's one of my favorites. Now, moving off the gauge cluster, we have a really nice leather perforated steering wheel. It's very thin, not big and meaty like a BMW steering wheel. It falls very nicely into hand. And we do have these gorgeous metal paddle shifters. These are optional though, even on the Veloce trim. You do have to add these. That's part of that Brembo brake package that I mentioned. There is one thing that I dislike about this steering wheel though. It's this button that you use to switch between all of those modes that I showed you to have the various information in the gauges there. When you don't push that button, this controls your music. So you click this button and now it controls what's in the middle. And then after a few seconds, it'll go back to controlling your music. So every once in a while, I went to go change this and then I thought it was still able to change, but then it changed my radio song, which was a little bit annoying. We have our 10.25-inch touchscreen here, powered by Uconnect 5, wireless CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, Alexa integration. This is great. As I mentioned, heated and ventilated seats, heated steering wheel. You can connect 2 phones to this. It's absolutely great. You've got your e-save mode that you can go into. That's going to either hold the battery at whatever state of charge it's currently at, or you can actually charge it using the engine as well. This is a really good system. We also have optionally a 360-degree camera. This vehicle does have a ton of standard safety features, but the 360 camera is going to be optional. But I do like how not everything is controlled on this screen. I like how you have your physical buttons here for climate and everything like that. I mentioned the DNA controller, and we do have our USB and USB-C ports and a big, nice wireless charger here in front of the shifter. All right, now let's get behind the wheel of the Alfa Romeo Tonale. And I think that a big reason why people have gravitated towards the Alfa Romeo brand, however small number of customers that is because Alfa Romeos drive great. Both the Stelvio and the Giulia are top of their class in terms of being fun to drive, and I don't think the Tonale is going to be too much of an exception there. This is benchmarked against things like the BMW X1, Audi Q3, and the Mercedes-Benz GLA, and I think maybe with the exception of the Mercedes, which is available as an AMG model, none of those are the most fun to drive options. So let's talk about what we get here on the Tonale. They were originally going to offer a gasoline engine with 268 horsepower, but they decided to go plug-in hybrid only. It's the same powertrain that you get on the Dodge Hornet RT. It's a 1.3-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, mated to a 6-speed automatic transmission. The engine on its own produces 181 horsepower. All of that power goes out to the front wheels only. But you also have a 90 kilowatt electric motor that produces about 121 horsepower all on its own, mated with a 15.5 kilowatt hour battery. So together, if you add the engine horsepower and the electric motor horsepower, you're looking at 285 horsepower and 305 pound-feet of torque, which Alfa Romeo is calling best in class. I guess maybe you're not including that Mercedes GLA 35 in that class, but just in terms of standard horsepower, this definitely is the most powerful. However, it is less powerful than the Dodge Hornet. The Dodge Hornet with the plug-in hybrid drivetrain is rated at 288 horsepower, so 3 horsepower more, and a whopping 383 pound-feet of torque, so significantly more torque. And I'm not really sure why the Hornet has so much more power and torque. It might have something to do with the fact that the Tonale does not have the Hornet's power shot function, which is that overboost feature that's going to give you maximum electric power and torque for a few seconds. So that could have something to do with the power discrepancy. Alfa Romeo quotes about a 5.5 second 0 to 60 time, which is not going to pin you back in your seat, but it's nothing to scoff at either, especially given that this thing weighs over 4,100 pounds. So it is kind of a beefy boy for being as small as it is. You also have that 15.5 kilowatt hour battery that I mentioned, so you can drive this car around in electric only mode, which is what I'm doing right now, for about 30 miles. So that is really good. If your commute is about 15 miles or less, you should be able to get there, get home, charge up your car overnight, and not burn a drop of gasoline until the weekend, and then you can save it for your longer road trips, where the car will get about 320 miles of range total if you combine the gasoline in the tank and the electric battery. By the way, charging that electric battery, if you install a level 2 plug in your household, it'll take around 2.5 hours, which is really not bad at all. This car should charge at about 7.5 kilowatt speeds with that level 2. You also get a level 1, which is just your normal household outlet. You get one of those as standard kit with the Tonale. If you plug that into the wall, you should be able to get a full charge in about 8.5 hours. So still overnight, which is really not bad. Now, I told you I would talk to you more about the DNA mode shifter. So it means something different on all Alfa Romeo models, but here on this plug-in hybrid Tonale, the N is going to be your base mode. It stands for natural. It's going to combine the electric and gasoline power, mostly relying on electricity until the battery runs out. So I'm driving around kind of normally. The tachometer is currently sitting at 0 because the engine is not on. I can give it a healthy dose of throttle and then it will kick on the engine because it knew I needed a good little burst of acceleration there. If I go ahead and twist the knob down into its A setting, that stands for advanced efficiency, now I have that power charge gauge instead. So now when I put my foot heavy on the throttle, it's going to show my percentage, ranging from 0 up to 100% throttle or power output in this case, and I can literally floor it to the floor, and it's going to keep me in electric mode. The only time it's going to kick on that engine is if I floor it and then go to kick down. It's going to tell me advanced efficiency mode is unavailable, and it's going to put me back into N mode because it knows it's an emergency, you need more passing power, and the electric motor alone is not going to do it. It's also worth mentioning that while you're driving in electric mode, although this is a full-time all-wheel drive vehicle when you're just driving around normally, if you're driving on electric power, it is a rear-wheel drive vehicle. So this might not be a rear platform like the Stelvio and the Giulia are, but you can drive it in rear-wheel only mode if you want. And then we've got our dynamic setting. So it stands for either dynamic or dual power. It's going to maximize all of the engine's performance. So it's mostly going to keep the engine on all the time. Woo, gives you much greater access to the performance. You don't have to wait for the engine to kick on. It knows when you put the throttle, the engine's already going to be on, so you're going to really have all of your power right away. It's also really going to sharpen up the steering. You get a lot heavier steering here. I think that the steering in this crossover is really nice just as it is. It has a really nice on-center feel that gives you a decent amount of control. It's not really up to snuff with like a hot hatchback, but I think it is a lot more fun than something like an Audi Q3 or a Volvo XC40. So this does kind of give me hot hatch vibes a little bit. I wish maybe Alfa Romeo would have leaned a little more into the hot hatch aspect of it, but you never know. Maybe they could do a little bit of a hotter performance variant of this car in the near future, although they say that a full-on quadrifoglio variant is very unlikely. If you opt for the top Veloce trim, which we're driving now, you can get adaptive suspension. Passive suspension is what comes on the other two trim levels, so you have to step all the way up to the top Tonale trim if you want the adaptive suspension. It goes into sport mode when you put it into the D setting. It definitely firms up the suspension, although it doesn't become super stiff and uncomfortable. You can just kind of feel all the bumps and cracks in the road a little bit more. Even in this setting, I think it is more comfortable than the Mercedes GLA. I think that is a really, really stiff ride. And if you go ahead and take it out of D setting, or you can leave it in dynamic and just push the suspension button to go back to the soft setting. And in that mode, I find find the suspension very compliant, even though we are driving this car on the 20-inch wheels. It's probably a lot more comfortable if you were to get the 19s or the smaller 18-inch wheels. Overall, I would say this is a very fun driving experience, which is what I would expect from an Alfa Romeo. It's certainly not the most fun car in the lineup. It would go Giulia, Stelvio, this for me clearly in that order. But again, this is targeting more of a casual audience than those other two Alfa Romeo models, especially the Quadrifolios. Picture somebody that maybe owned like a Golf GTI or a Civic or something like that that's ready to upgrade, wants something that's semi-electrified but maybe isn't ready for a fully electric car, but wants something with a lot of style, good amount of luxury, and a strong brand value proposition. I do like all of the stuff that comes standard on here, like the safety functions. We get adaptive cruise control standard, lane keep assist standard. The only thing that was really optional safety wise is that 360-degree camera and the parking sensors. So I love that Alfa Romeo doesn't nickel and dime you for all of that, which is great. So if you are looking for a really fun to drive car in this compact entry-level segment and you want something that's a little bit more special than your average Toyota or Mazda, and more unique than something like a BMW or an Audi or a Mercedes, the Tonale is a pretty cool little option. All right, so that was the 2023 Alfa Romeo Tonale. Time to price it out. The base Sprint model is going to start just under $43,000, making it significantly more expensive than other models in this segment, like the BMW X1, Audi Q3, Volvo XC40, and Mercedes-Benz GLA. However, you have to consider what you get on the Tonale. You get standard all-wheel drive, you get a plug-in hybrid drivetrain, and you get more safety equipment. So if you added all of that stuff to the Audi or the BMW or the Mercedes, you'd probably be spending as much or more on this Alfa Romeo. So I really think the value proposition is not bad when you look at it that way. Stepping up to the TI model is going to cost you about $45,600, and this top Veloce trim is just under 50 grand. Now, if you wanted to go nuts with the options, you could load one of these up to about $58,000, which is going to definitely overlap with the larger Stelvio, but you're not going to get that plug-in hybrid drivetrain. And actually, this produces more power and torque than that larger Stelvio. So if you're in the market for a luxury plug-in hybrid crossover, this is kind of it. The only other options that you have are the Mini Cooper Countryman and this car's platform stablemate, the Dodge Hornet, which is only a little bit cheaper, but doesn't have that sexy Alfa Romeo badge. I really hope you've enjoyed this look at the 2024 Alfa Romeo Tonale. For more videos like it, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to be alerted of our latest videos. I'll see you next time.